Well, welcome. So I want to give you my view on the 4-day working week. Now, if you read The Guardian, you would see that every week there are news about this revolutionary management practice. They started in 2018. It caught the attention of the think tanks, and it made all the way into the manifesto of the Labour Party in the 2019 elections. So I want to give you my view, but if you see, it's so recent that even 2 days ago, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, she flags the 4-day working week, this management practice, as a way to rebuild the economy after the pandemic. Now, I want to talk about it, but I want to. What I'm going to propose and what I'm going to talk about is not the 4-day week as a management practice. I will talk about the 4-day week as a government legislated implementation overall in society. So you can think about it with the slogan, Friday is the new Saturday. So what I mean is all the economic activity that we currently do Monday to Friday should be done Monday to Thursday. All economic activities that occur over the weekend should be done over 3 days, Friday to Sunday. And whatever activities occur over the 7 days should still be done over 7 days. So us at Birkbeck, we would teach over 4 days. My wife, she's an obstetrician. She would have to do the occasional shift work over the weekend. So I want to start with some criticisms of the 4-day week. So let me go over 8 of them that you commonly hear. It would greatly increase the cost of living. It would increase wages generally by more than 20% and decrease production. It would be impractical to all industries. It would create a craving for additional luxuries to occupy the additional time. It would mean a trend towards the arena. Rome did that and Rome died. It would be against the best interest of men who want to work and advance. It would not work out as a permanent thing. It would make us more vulnerable to the economic onslaughts of China, now working as hard as she can to overcome our lead. So the criticisms that you of the 4-day week that you hear are just simple variations of these. Now, this specific formulation, I got it from a pocket bulletin of the National Association of Manufacturers in 1922. And they were criticizing this innovative and radical management practice called the 5-day working week. So the first point is there's nothing biological or theological or astrological about working 5 days. It's a social, economic, and political construct. So it's an institution that can be changed. So the second point is that if all these criticisms were valid, we would still be working 6 days a week from sunrise to sunset. Now, I'll come back to what I think is the one really valid criticism of the 4-day week. I'll come back after closer to the end of the talk, but I want to go now over my own 8 reasons, economic reasons for the 4-day week. And to do so, I've enlisted what my wife calls a kind of a list of serial killers. They are not serial killers. They are just very famous economists from the 19th and the 20th century, each one a torchbearer of a particular ideology. So I'll go over reasons for the 4-day working week, each within the ideology and doctrine of each one of these political economists. So I'm going to start with Lord Keynes, and of course he's very famous. If you read the articles on the 4-day working week, you'll see that 80% of them refer to this article that he wrote in 1930, predicting that in 100 years, so in 2030, we would be working 15-hour weeks. Now, he clearly failed that prediction, but let's look at why did he make, what was the assumptions or the premises that he based this prediction. first, he said he thought that we would be able to, and second, that we would want to. Being able, what he said is that productivity is going to increase at the same pace it has increased in the 19th century, and he was spot on. He said that living standards would increase 4 to 8 times in the 100 years, and GDP per capita is now in Western economies 5 to 6 times higher than it was back in 1930. So he was spot on the prediction that productivity has increased dramatically. And when you increase productivity, you can either consume more. So think, if you double productivity, you can work the same amount of hours, consume double, or you can maintain consumption and work half of the time. And what he said is that we would share, societies would want to share these gains of productivity both by consuming more and enjoying more leisure. But we haven't. So as societies, we chose not to. We chose not to reduce our working weeks or reducing hours. But this is a choice. It's not a law of economics. We are always in time to change because we can. But Keynes was more known and revolutionized macroeconomics because of his general theory. So up until Keynes, people or economists thought about the economy from the supply side, from what firms and how they produce, what do they use to produce machinery, workers, and productivity, how you put them together. And that was the main focus of economics. Keynes revolutionized because he thought firms can have machines and workers, but if they don't have customers, the economy won't be running. So he put an emphasis on aggregate demand. And how does the 4-day week, how can it stimulate the economy through the aggregate demand? I'm going now to not an economist, but what Forbes and other management newspapers or academics think of the greatest entrepreneur of the 20th century. It was Henry Ford. And Henry Ford, 4 years after that pocket bulletin, criticizing the 5-day week, Henry Ford implemented the 5-day week in his own plans. And this is what he wrote about it. But it's the influence on consumption which makes the short day and the short week so necessary. The people who consume the bulk of the goods are the people who make them. Instead of business being slowed up because people are off work, it will be speeded up because the people consume more in their leisure than in their working time. This will lead to more work, and this to more profits, and this to more wages. The result of more leisure will be the exact opposite of what most people might suppose it to be. He asked, who is going to buy my cars if everyone's in the factory 6 days a week? So people consume more in their leisure time. If we give them one more day, we will stimulate the economy through the demand. Keynesians should support the 4-day working week. Now, this man you have here, this is Joseph Schumpeter, also one of the greatest economists from the first half of the 20th century. And he, like the economists prior to Keynes, focused on the firms as the automobiles of economic progress. And amongst this, one of the key elements is productivity. And the 4-day week is going to increase productivity. And again, we can go back to the reasons, going back to Henry Ford. It's going to be 2 reasons. It's going to increase productivity because you will have better workers. So Henry Ford said, we find that men come back after a 2-day holiday so fresh and keen that they are able to put their minds as well as their hands into work. Now, at the time, the problem was this repetitive motion syndrome of always trying to screw the bolts and the nuts. Nowadays, the problems are different. It's more related to stress and burnout and mental illness. give one more day to the workers, they'll be more productive on Monday. The second reason is better management. Henry Ford wrote, "The harder we crowd business for time, the more efficient it becomes. Management must keep the pace with this new demand, and it will." So the 4-day working week is going to distinguish good managers from bad managers better than an MBA. Good managers are going to change processes. They are going to reduce the time of meetings for 30 minutes. They'll share inboxes. They'll get new machines or new apps. They will change whatever products they have. They will adjust. The increased productivity. All the firms that have implemented the 4-day working week, the accounts is that output just doesn't fall. Productivity goes up and compensates the fewer hours, and output doesn't fall. When the 5-day working week was implemented back in the day, the firms, if you read newspaper articles of the time, firms implementing or industries implementing, just output didn't fall, because productivity increased enough to compensate the fall in hours. But if you think about the firms as the automobile of economic progress, really the engine is, according to Schumpeter, is the entrepreneur. So Schumpeter admired Henry Ford more than anyone. He represented the entrepreneur that he imagined, the ideal of an entrepreneur. And the 4-day working week, and this is the fourth reason, it's going to unleash an unimaginable potential of talent and innovation. And this, I think, it's one of the most positive reasons for the 4-day working week. And I want to go back to Henry Ford, now to his biography. He wrote, so he came from a farmer. His family were farmers. He was obviously very bright. He became an engineer, and he worked for Thomas Edison in the Edison's power plant in Detroit. And this is what he wrote in his biography. "It was in 1890 that I began on a double-cylinder engine. I was in the day shift, and every night, and all of every Saturday night, I worked on the new motor. In the spring of 1893, the machine was running." So Henry Ford he created his automobile and his engine while working a day job over 6 days. He worked at night and the whole of Saturday night on the new motor. It took him 3 years to build the car. So the point here is that people are not necessarily passionate about their day job, but they are certainly more passionate about what they do in their spare time. And a lot of people would use the spare time to create something new. And if you think this is not the exception, there are a lot of innovation that started by people that had a day job and worked on the weekends or in the evenings. So Harley Davidson, Nike, Instagram, Apple, board games and computer games. One of my favorite stories is Sarah Blakely. She was in 93 selling faxes door to door. And she had this idea for some special leggings. And she worked for 2 years on these leggings, still with a day job, developed her brand, Spanx, and they turned out to be really, really good. Ford ranked her as one of the 100 most influential women. Her net worth now is $1 billion. Another example, since I've mentioned my wife, she's an obstetrician. In obstetrics, there hasn't been any innovation in the last 150 years. A few years ago, an Argentinian car mechanic, he was in a barbecue and he had to take a cork out of a wine bottle. And he used this technique where you put in a plastic bag, you put around the cork, and then you blow it a bit and you pull it out. And he thought, why can't we deliver babies like this? And it sounds ridiculous, but it turns out he was onto something. So he developed the idea, and it works. It has won awards by the World Health Organization. It has been trialed, small trials, and it has worked. It's now kind of a bigger trial. And if it succeeds, it will be the innovation, one innovation in obstetrics in the last 150 years. So that's why Wired, this the Bible of entrepreneurs, say entrepreneurs, don't give up your day jobs yet. The 4-day working week is going to give more time for people to develop their creativity, their innovation. This is going to be new progress of the future. Conservatives should see this. Now, we come to Karl Marx, and of course the contender to prime minister that supported the 4-day working week, he was a Marxist. So it is the kind of the political wing that has seen more support for the 4-day working week. And one of the economic arguments they put forward is that the 4-day week is going to reduce unemployment through work sharing. Now, this is the argument that economists really frown upon. And it's so common that there's a name for it. It's called the lump of labor fallacy. And economists disagree because it's an accounting view of the economy. So it sees the economy as a fixed amount of production output. And then if workers are not there on Friday, firms have to hire 20% more workers to do the same job over 4 days. And economists scorn this argument because it doesn't account for any adjustment of consumers in terms of demand, of workers in terms of productivity, or of managers in their processes. And this is what economics is all about this adjustment. Just think, if the productivity argument holds and productivity can increase to compensate the fall in hours, why would firms have to hire more workers? So don't really expect firms to hire 20% more workers. They might hire more, but surely it won't be of that magnitude. So this is a poor from the point of view of economics, this is a poor argument. Now, Karl Marx would make two arguments for the 4-day working week. And they are related to what people call technological unemployment, and it's better described in this comic strip. So we are living now under the fourth, or people have called the fourth industrial revolution. There's been 3 before, and during these 3 industrial revolutions, they brought unimaginable progress. But they came with a side effect, which is technological unemployment. And Lord Byron, when he joined the House of Lords in his first speech, he described how people in the north of England, workers that had lost their jobs to machines, were burning machines, were burning those machines. This has happened before, but what's particular about it is that up until 1940, the shortening of the working day, the shortening of the working week, and the shortening of the working year was always in the forefront of measures to reduce this side effect of technological unemployment. It has stopped in around 1940s, but it should be put back in the forefront. The 4-day working week will help deal with minimize the side effects of technological unemployment. It will raise the wages and improve the lives of the 99%. So think about it. In the last years, the firms, when you think about technology, firms had the carrot and workers had the stick. Firms had the carrot, you get new machines, you are going to get more profits. The workers had the stick. If you don't work hard, you might lose your job. Under the 4-day working week is just swapping. The workers will have the carrot and they'll have the benefits of technological progress. Firms will have the stick, but the incentives are there. It's going to work even better. Now let's go to Hayek, and he was the torchbearer of liberalism. So he wrote the book Road to Serfdom, who was in Margaret Thatcher's bedside table. Now, he valued Above all, he valued freedom. Freedom for him was the most important thing, economical, political freedom. Now, one of the arguments of some liberals is that the government should not intervene in legislating working time. Now, I would advise people who make this argument to reread The Road to Serfdom, to go to chapter 3, where Hayek wrote, "The successful use of competition does not preclude some types of government interference, for instance, to limit working hours." So he wasn't against it because it doesn't. It's a level playing field. It doesn't affect benefit some companies other than others. It doesn't distort incentives. It affects everyone in the same way, and it's just, you can think about enhancing competition rather than weakening competition. And as of now, under the 5-day working week, people are not really free to choose to work less. People that go into part-time, let's say 80%, they have wage cuts of more than 20%, they have pension penalties, and they pass on promotion opportunities because they are just seen as not so committed to a firm. And still in the UK, 25% of all employees are working part-time. These are mainly women that are paying this cost. In Netherlands, it's half of all employees are working part-time. People want to work part-time and they're willing to pay this huge cost, individual cost, to do so. So I don't think under a 5-day week, people are really free to choose how much they want to work. But under a 4-day working week, they would, because people working 4 days can still work more if they want. So myself, I'll still bring papers, academic papers, to home to read over the weekend. White-collar workers can set up their own consultancy and do consultancy projects on the side. Blue-collar workers can moonlight, get a second job, or use the gig economy to work a few more hours over the weekend. You'll have more freedom to choose how much to work under a 4-day working week than under a 5. And number 8, because it will reconcile a polarized society. And I wish I didn't have to make this argument for the 4-day working week, but I have. It's not a positive argument, it's just a 4-day working week as avoiding a very risky downside risk to the economy. So we know that the progress that we had in the last decades, brought by technology, by globalization, it hasn't been shared equally amongst all members of society. So the average Joe in the economy has benefited, but on average, nothing is an average. So a large chunk of people, of citizens that were left behind, and the austerity of the years of the last decade just compounded on this sentiment. So already before the pandemic, we were in the crossroads, but the pandemic just made it kind of very, very prominent. And there are 2 options on the table. One is the offer of populists, which, let it be no doubt, there's no substance there. It's the offer is turning back the clock. It's undoing globalization, as we're already seeing. It's trying to block technological progress, for instance, subsidizing the coal, as Trump is doing, dying industries. It's jeopardizing the institutions that we got, for instance, central bank independence, bashing of experts. This is a way back, and it's the biggest risk of the economy that we face now. Now, the other option on the table is the option of the status quo, which is doubling down. No, it works. We'll push for more globalization. We'll keep budgets in line. We'll have the same practices, expecting a different result for the majority. And this is the ostrich approach. It's not recognizing that it hasn't worked for the majority. So there's a philosopher in Harvard that says that we need the originality of the post-war solutions before the war. And what I think the 4-day week is that original solution. It brings to everyone the benefits of a system. It's the benefits of a system that people came to disdain. And the important thing, it's for everyone. because if you have to think what is there in common between rich and poor, man and woman, black and white, left and right, young and old, Jews, Muslims, Christians, Brexiteers or Remainers alike, everyone likes a bank holiday weekend. So these are my 8 reasons for the 4-day working week. Now, I told you I wanted to come back to the only really criticism of the 4-day week. So if you think about the criticisms of the 5-day week back in the day, there is one truly remarkable aspect, and this is really amazing, is that the critics disappeared once it was implemented. There was never anyone trying to go back to a 6-day working week. And this is remarkable because you see, there's hardly anything is that consensual. So the European Union was never consensual, such that as Brexit has shown, even the NHS that it's so cherished in the UK, they still have the critics that want to privatize the NHS. But there's no lunatic that wants to go back to the 6-day working week. And this really just shows how the benefits of the 4-day week are so widespread, and they can reach Marxists and liberals, conservatives and Keynesians. So then it comes to really the only criticism of the 4-day working week, that the only one that's valid, is that it's the status quo. The status quo is 5 days, and change is hard. Change is always hard. So the implementation is going to be disruptive. And what the pandemic has shown us is that this criticism is right now at its weakest. The time to implement the 4-day working week is now. So the pandemic, so first of all, it shrank aggregate demand and threw millions to unemployment. The 4-day working week can help bring it back. It increased government debt to very high levels, and it's likely to expand the scope of government. So that means that the government won't have the usual Keynesian scope to stimulate the economy. It accelerated some existing trends, technology implementation and unemployment, growing inequalities, rise of debt. But above all, and this I think it's really the biggest danger, is the risk of populism. But at the same time, the pandemic broke the status quo. So nothing is normal anymore, and the only certainty that we have is that the normal is going to change. We are not going to back to how things were. The 4-day week then comes as the time is now, because it's the time where it's going to be least disruptive, because everything is changing. So I want to finish this first part. Churchill said that whenever there's 2 economists in the room, you'll always have 2 opinions, unless one of them is Lord Keynes, where you invariably will have 3 very different opinions. Now, I don't expect everyone to agree with all the reasons I gave, as much as I don't expect liberals to agree with Marxists and vice versa. But I do expect that some people would be persuaded by some of the arguments. Now, the second point is that most of you don't really know me. So you don't know if I'm a good economist or a bad economist. There are good entrepreneurs, good politicians, bad politicians. So I will leave you with the words from another economist, much better than I ever will be. And these words were written in this book. This book is called 4 Days, 40 Hours. It was written in 1970, describing this new radical management practice called the 4-day working week. So although it just came in the news in the last 2 years, it's been around for 50 years. And in the foreword of this book, these were the words: "Progress comes from technical invention, and we shall ever be grateful to the discoverer of fire, the inventor of the electric dynamo, and the perfecter of Hollandaise sauce. But there are also momentous social inventions. Indeed, as society becomes more affluent, these may become increasingly vital. Without language, we would still live in the cave, and all honor to that unknown genius who discovered that disputes of precedent could be settled by a toss of a coin. The 4-day week is precisely such a social invention. Now, the economist who wrote these words was no other than Paul Samuelson. Paul Samuelson is the father of modern economics. He was the one that changed economics from the political science of Keynes, Hayek, Schumpeter, and Marx to the more mathematical science that we have today. He's unanimously considered the father of economics. He won the Nobel Prize in Economics for his countless contributions in 1970. In that same year, he wrote that the 4-day week was a momentous social invention comparable to the invention of language. So I would leave you not with my own words, but with the words of someone much wiser, Paul Samuelson.